Hello, and welcome to IMC Licensing's webinar on Best Practices in License Acquisition. I am Molly Holzknecht, Product Development and Account Coordinator at IMC Licensing, and I will be the moderator for today's webinar, which will be hosted by Todd Donaldson, IMC's Vice President of Sales, and Jane Steverson, IMC's Director of License Acquisition. If you have any questions during the presentation, please send them via the chat function on the right-hand side of your screen, and make sure Q&A group is in the selected recipient in the to box. The host and panelists will try to answer all of the questions in the allotted time at the end of the 30-minute webinar. Thank you, and I will now turn it over to Jane to start the program.
Good afternoon. While most of us are probably far removed from our school days, our education continues whether we want it to or not. So we offer up today both a tutorial and a group study on doing your homework in license acquisition. I'm Jane Steverson, and I'll be moderating our discussion along with Todd Donaldson. Together, Todd and I lead the newly formed but somewhat seasoned license acquisition division of IMC Licensing. For years, IMC has helped create great new products via licensing, working with brands and manufacturers across many different categories. We will offer up today our thoughts on some of the best practices in assessing opportunities, brands, and licensors, and we'll be joined by some of our visiting professors, and I think they carry a degree of pride, and a couple of graduates of the school, our licensing school of Hard Knocks.
First, we have Frank Everett, a 20-year veteran of the Wars, Waste, and Grocers Freezers, currently with the Matterhorn Group, which through licensing, product development, and the acquisition of key operations has emerged to challenge the big two in ice cream and frozen novelties. We also have Rob Auerbach, who is President and CEO of Candyrific, a company that through unique products, merchandising, and program development has delivered true brand extensions to confection companies and interactive brand experiences to a number of entertainment and movie properties.
Okay, everyone, let's gather around the table and we'll go over what we plan to cover in our study session today. First, let's discuss how to go about discovering uncharted waters and unclaimed territories and white spaces at retail. Secondly, we'll look at how to choose the right brand or brands to reach out our targeted populations. After that, we're going to deal with some of the abstracts of evaluating the company that is behind, in front of, over, or under the brand. And to tie it all together and prepare us for our next task, we will unveil a surface formula for success. Well, we will perhaps just discuss how to tie it all together, I guess. Since we all know there's no surefire formula, we have to ask that our panelists to offer up some doses of reality and some surreality in addition to their stories of success.
We begin our study actually at the end. At the end, in the sense we are going to work backwards from a goal we have set for ourselves. Let's call it an X on the map, success defined, or the place where I want to take my company. The journey there may include some uncharted territory for you, but I can almost guarantee someone has navigated it before. And whether or not they did it successfully, it's all relative. But what are some things you can do to prepare? Study the ones who have laid some claims there already. They are the category leaders for a reason. Understand an area that they have not occupied and set your sights on that area. Talk to peers, colleagues, clients who you know have valuable insight. Use your retailers, buyers, and even distributors as real partners. Ask often and persistently about product areas that they believe could offer better turns, about category leaders that a buyer would love to see challenged, and about brands that perform well in their store they would like to see extensions from. Retailers have a lot to gain from category growth, and don't be afraid to let them choose the path on occasion. And if you have a strong personal or professional conviction, step out or step up on your own. Become the explorer and expand the boundaries. Opportunities to become the first mover are very rare. Frank, I know as part of your approach it all begins with a gap, and I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit about how you assess opportunities and share a little bit with the team here and the people assembled around our table.
Sure. Thanks a lot, Todd. For me, all of this comes back to you're launching a product that you want to have successful. There probably isn't a license that can make everything happen. So you do the analysis of the category you're going to end based on really the numbers and who is successful, where is the growth, and is there within the category a spot that appears to have many of the symptoms of success, but no one is occupying it. If right now diet and health products are the big place to be, look at them all carefully and see, is there something open? Is there a gap? So for us, we start with the actual numbers. We look at the sales trends and define the category. And then, and if there is a gap, we often look at a license as a way to fill it. It's so expensive today to build awareness out there. You know, the days of seeing commercials of everyday food items on TV are getting more scarce because the cost to launch something is so expensive and build that awareness. So using a license gives you a chance to have instant awareness, but instant awareness still is not going to make the product successful. You have to have a product and you have to fill a gap.
Can you share, I mean, like we have some items up there that you can talk about some of your history. We did very briefly touched upon it previously, but some items you were able to take in and find some gaps.
Yes. I mean, certainly one of the most successful food licenses I've ever worked on was Weight Watchers, and that has an audience built into it. And I think that's a lot of when you buy a license, you're buying a pre-existing audience. And it still has to be relevant. I mean, Weight Watchers is kind of a simple use of a license, and it's been used in many food categories. It just happens to be very successful in frozen desserts. But you take a brand like Tropicana, and you have already convinced people the orange taste of your product is going to probably be the best you can get. And then we had many very successful years with Tropicana. When we launched Atkins, it was during a craze of everyone looking at carbs and looking at their diets differently. Unfortunately, product took off like crazy, but like so many diets, it can fall quickly out of favor, and that's in your license goes the same direction. There were licenses like Snapple where we thought that was a no-brainer, and it turned out to, yes, it communicates refreshment and taste, but it's a very crowded place to be. That is not really a gap. There wasn't a gap in the marketplace, and the product struggled.
Well, thank you very much for sharing some of those very specific examples.
You know, just two other ones that filling a gap. The Godiva also struggled because Haagen-Dazs and Ben & Jerry's had covered that territory and already were in place, and Dove. So even with a name as powerful as Godiva, coming in without a gap existing is very risky.
And we will talk a little bit later about the things that go into the equation for success, and there always is an unknown factor, and we will talk a little bit about that. I'm going to turn it back over to Jane to talk a little bit about a lesson that most of us kind of recall, the 3 R's.
Thanks, Todd. Usually when we want to talk about the 3 R's in study, we call to mind reading, writing, and arithmetic. Our 3 R's that we consider all actually begin with R, and in recognition, we do not mean just brand awareness, but there's also an acknowledgement of the brand, equity, and or equities when it is called to mind. For example, from this perspective, the brand recognition of Starbucks tops the brand awareness of Folgers. Our next R that we're going to discuss is relevance. It is relevant to the brand, your product, the target demographic, the price point that you need to support. IMC has one client whose very simple litmus test, the litmus test for relevance is the feasibility of a brand. And in that license category, it's going into the licensor core category. For example, this is entirely conjecture of course. If he produced a jerky, he would not license a Harley-Davidson license because Jack Link's would be a difficult equity to build a licensed motorcycle around. But a Jack Link's marinade, that might work because of the proven success of the commodities like Tabasco, A1, Casey Masterpiece in the meat snacks. And a fourth R could be rolled under relevance in relation. Where does the brand stand in relation to its competitors? Let's look at reliability, another one of our R's. It's simply, can I expect the brand to maintain its recognition and relevance for as long as I need it to do so? If I want to build a cookware program around a chef, and it takes about 3 years to get even the initial momentum in a program, do I really want to take that the Food Network's celebrity chef du jour? Is also understanding that a one-year license is perfectly okay if it meets your business understanding, or if it meets your business plan, rather. This often is the case in licensing movie properties, where even a year of relevance may be pushing the envelope even for a successful box office hit. And the answer is, of course, all of the following. Depending on your map to success that you would find, one of the R's may take precedence over the others, but all need to be considered, of course. You may decide that a reduced overall awareness of a luxury brand gives way to the high relevance it brings in our niche offering at a premium retailer, or that the volatile personal life of the celebrity is outweighed by the extremely loyal communal following that she has. Rob, I've heard you describe how all of these elements affect your decision to license, but you also bring it as perspective of the entire portfolio. Can you share with our audience?
Yeah, when we, one of the things that we look at is we don't want to be in competition against ourselves because a buyer only has so much space. So you don't want to come in and have 3 girl properties and no boy properties, and they're going to pick from one of the others. So when we look at our properties, we look at our internal competition with ourselves. So we want to balance it out. We want to have girl properties, we want to have boy properties. Of course, the mother load is when you have gender-neutral products like M&Ms and Skittles and Starburst, which we have. So we want to look at the demographics and the gender, but we also want to look at the type of properties it is. So evergreen property, and by its nature, would be something like the M&M's brand, or even Tweety, or brand, or Etch-a-Sketch that we have. These brands are going to be around forever. Then you have what I would call the more risky, but still there's equity, which is on TV shows like Nickelodeon, where you have SpongeBob and Dora on every day or on regular rotation. And then you have the strictly movie properties. For instance, we have Shrek, and now we're launching Madagascar. And there's the big risk-reward ratio. If the movie's bad, you're done. You got a lot of bad inventory that you're gonna have to get rid of quick. So it's like a star that burns really bright. We get the movie release, and we have a little down, then we have the DVD release, but if you don't get it done in those 2 bites of the apple, it's really not going to happen. And so when within that subset, we select safe movie products like Shrek 3. It wouldn't be a 3 if 1 and 2 didn't work out. Same thing with Madagascar. It's a sequel. We get offered movies all the time. For instance, we were just offered Kung Fu Panda. First movie, you don't know how it's going to do. As it turned out, the movie did excellent at the box office, but did relatively poorly in pulling product through in the marketplace. So even though the core product was definitely acceptable, just didn't translate out into the licensed arena. So just because you have a big name, you got to be careful, and of course you have to know in your segment what's going to translate.
Okay, and just talk to us a little bit about balance, Rob.
Balance within the portfolio itself.
Yes.
Yeah, because We love Evergreen, of course, because you can build over time, and the long buying patterns, especially we've been involved in a lot of seasonal work with M&Ms. You're talking, right now we're showing Christmas of next year. So you have these long windows of opportunity, but it's a slow build. So you don't want to spend 2 years and then your license is over or the opportunity is over. So we like to do consumables, we like to do evergreen, but we also will do these movie licenses that can give us a big hit, but we do it with products and platforms that we know are already successful, where we've used them in other properties. So we know that the product's going to sell if we've done our job right of combining it with a relevant license, then our opportunity for success goes way up. We're not going to take unproven product within our portfolio, put it on a brand new license. Now you got 2 stones to push up the hill, and because when you miss your target, it can be painful. And
sure.
I've had some misses, and we all have. So we'll get to that maybe a little later, but we will. Okay, but we want to do everything we can do to assure success, and part of that is we don't do label slapping. If we're going to take a product, go all the way. We're going to do tooling. We're going to do 3D sculpts. We're really going to make it mean something to the consumer.
Okay, great.
Frank, you had talked a little bit earlier in regards to some things that you assess on your own. You talked about customer trends or trends even in the marketplace, such as low carb and the diet craze. What are some things that maybe we have not discussed that you also use to help assess the brand?
Well, usually when you start a discussion with a major license, there is some type of research that they have already done on that license, and they can tell you who is the audience that uses the product or the brand that is the primary license. And so you can, to your point of relevancy, usually access some data to make sure that you're aligning the target audience that already exists with that product with the product that you're going to make that launch that's probably in a completely different category. That's important. I think another acid test, and it's by no means the final test, and you may have mentioned it, but when you go into a buyer's office at a major retailer and it does not resonate with them, they're confused, you really have to wonder if you've got a concept. I usually like to have a marketing plan that's built around 1 to 3 words, and if that license doesn't mean something to the retailer who is trying to get new products in to make money, you really have to back up and think about what you're doing.
Rob is nodding in agreement here. It sounds like you might have a story behind that, or stories.
Well, I mean, also buyers are consumers, and they have kids at their household, and they know these products. And so if you have a less than brand name property and they're sort of saying, yeah, I think I've heard of that, I mean, it's like, whoa, it's got to be something that resonates. And when, for instance, when we had the Pokemon license for confectionery before Pokemon got hot, we talked to Walmart, and they were like, what? I've never heard of that. What is that? And we said, oh, yeah, it's really big in the toy aisle. I mean, go to the other side of Walmart, and you'll see it's huge over there, but the confectionery buyer had no knowledge of it, and he just blew it off. And then when it really exploded as the property du jour, then he called us back and was like, okay, now I understand it. So, and I think to Frank's point, if you have to explain what it is that you're doing, you're already behind the 8 ball with it.
Thanks. We've talked quite a bit about the brand itself, but now we want to speak a little bit about the wizard behind the curtain. And our last homework assignment may prove to be our most difficult. With management turnover, brand repositioning, mergers and acquisitions, evaluating the licensor or the company behind the brand can be very challenging. Some of the assessment can be done on some objective criteria, such as the number of licenses they have granted, success or failure in those programs, But I think that there's a compatibility factor here that's often ignored in licensing. A mutual goal and business plan may lead to a successful license, but doesn't always lead to a successful partnership. Personal preference can even come into play. You, as a licensee, may want a licensor who is heavily involved in product development, and you may want one that minds their own business and leaves you to yours. Agencies can also either figure in on either side and can either facilitate or even run interference in some of these cases. Rob, some things that we have talked about offline as we've discussed over a number of things, but you had mentioned that you were recently kind of faced with a decision, and you talked about movie properties on which one to take over for a new product offering. Can you tell us a little bit about how you stack these two against each other, really kind of looking even beyond the property itself and beyond that to the licensor behind them?
Well, and in particular, we're talking about DreamWorks, and I know DreamWorks and I know the personnel there, and I have great confidence in their ability to market whatever the property it is and make it out there where people are talking about it. There's news stories about it. They're going to run commercials, marketing. They're going to tie in with other products. As one of M&M's licensees, I see what they're doing. And for instance, DreamWorks was tied up with Shrek and M&M's. So I mean, I knew it was going to get a lot of marketing muscle. At the end of the day, why are we licensing? Somebody else has already created the brand awareness. They're the landlord, we're the tenant. We want to rent their equity. And if they're being sort of blasé about a movie and not really going out there and beating it and getting that buzz going, then they haven't done their job to help you do your job, which at the end of the day is giving them their royalties. And if they haven't done a good job of marketing, they're going to make my job much more difficult. So to your point, there are some licensors that will actively understand the relationship and they really want to help you be successful. There are some others that they just frankly want to collect a royalty check and they don't really care if you make money or don't make money as long as you meet the guarantees and get the royalties and they can pocket it and they don't really try that hard to help you.
Frank, what are some either green lights that you see that get you excited about working with a potential licensor and red flags that might come up in some of those same discussions?
I mean, working with them in general to start the discussion and go all the way to a contract and then continue all the way through many years of happiness.
Yeah, many years of happiness, exactly.
Well, you know, there's usually a lot of happiness if it succeeds, but at the very beginning, it is helpful to have a licensor who is easy to work with, helps you access information they have, gets back to you, keeps the ball rolling, can give approvals quickly, etc. And that's nice, but that still has nothing to do with making any money. It's simply an easier way to work. A consumer never bought a licensed product because the licensor was easy to work with. So you got to know that it's worth your time because you've done your homework, you've gotten the information, and in many cases you just put up with sometimes a difficult working situation. But once you get going and there are still problems that are occurring, again, a good licensor can help you and work with you and try to do things that could make the product a success. If it is a success, everybody is usually best friends and it's a wonderful relationship. The only thing that can interrupt that is the renewing of the license and that shaky moment when you renegotiate everything. But in general, I think about the license first and the licensor second.
Yeah, I can't imagine if I had to propose and remarry my wife every 3 years, how that might work out. But that's an entirely different discussion. I appreciate you kind of sharing that as well as we look at that. And we think in terms here of almost kind of turning the tables and everything that the licensor looks to put you through in terms of paces that you can look to put them to the similar type of paces, maybe not to the same extreme, but look at their track record, ask for references. Reputations are earned, and I can leave that with that pretty much saying, reputations are earned. Well, as we promised earlier, we are now going to move to our patented formula for success. What we did not share is that we're not going to share exactly what these variables actually stand for. But through some of the stories we shared, we know that not every product introduction makes it. And so there really is not a formula for success per se, but there are ways we can take a lot of these variables out of the situation. Through doing our homework, surrounding ourselves with strategic, knowledgeable partners, utilizing licensing to fill the gaps that we've talked about, we and companies like yours, the number of people that we have on the phone, examples we have of Matterhorn and Candyrific, will continue to bring new and meaningful products to store shelves. But before we field questions, we did want to give you here in this study session a sneak peek at the upcoming bonus question that's going to be on your test tomorrow. And after that, we're going to talk about a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So here we have that the year is 2001, and we're going to try to make some sense of this equation that we put up here. We have an established property that existed in the United Kingdom. They looked to bring it into the United States, and Nickelodeon pretty much immediately signed on board to put it into syndication and to put it into heavy rotation on their television network. Soon after that, they signed on Hasbro as a master toy licensee. Walmart got heavily involved at this point, committing to buying a licensed product and supporting the program. And as we look at the answer here, it's we actually didn't mean to give you the answer in this situation. The question was going to be try to guess the property, and if you take that last part of the image out of the equation, just looking at the first part of that, if you had heard that story, and I'll let Rob kind of chime in here because this actually is his story, but thinking in terms of looking at the partners that are on board, looking at that opportunity, all the things that we have assessed, a retailer is on board, a very experienced licensee in Hasbro, Nickelodeon, who does wonderful jobs of supporting their programs. What would you have done to actually get involved to put your piece into this equation? Thinking in terms of that, and then I'll let Rob, much like Paul Harvey, tell the rest of the story.
Yeah, talk about the train wreck.
Yeah.
I was there. In licensing show 2001, But Ugly Martians was by far and away the now stock, the now item. It was just everybody was talking about it. They signed up, maybe 100 licensees, every category. Everybody was going full out with it. It'd been very successful in the United Kingdom. Nickelodeon was going to run it. Hasbro had the whole master license with plush and posable, and Walmart was going to do this whole thing. The Martians had landed. It was going to be in every store, bring in all the licensees grouped in one place. Burger King was doing one of the giveaway toys with their meals. Everything was on go. We got tons of pre-orders. We were ordering like mad from our suppliers. And then an interesting thing happened. Nickelodeon had scheduled the launch in the summer, which meant it had been in heavy rotation for 4 months before the Christmas season, and Hasbro had produced all these goods that were going into Walmart, and so everything was just going along just fine. And the Nickelodeon made a scheduling change because of who knows what, and said, well, we're not going to start it. We're going to start it in January, after Christmas season. But all these other factors were already in place. Hasbro had produced the goods. Walmart had a spot for it. They were running their promotions. And so informally, they sort of said, well, we're already doing it. Let's just put it in for Christmas, see how it goes. But we all understand there's no TV. There's no license. There's no landlord yet. But it'll be fine. But this business, at the end of the day, is run by people, and people have emotional reactions. So the sales did naturally pour during the Christmas season because there was no support to it. And so Walmart went, ooh, I don't know, that wasn't so good. And people said, but yeah, but there was no license. But they still said, well, maybe it's a little too risky. And it was like dominoes. It fell apart. Hasbro said, well, we're not going to run first and second quarter advertising. Burger King said, well, we're not going to do it. And we started getting floods of cancellations on these orders, and I actually had the goods on the water coming as the fax and emails are saying for cancel, cancel, cancel. And we actually sold our merchandise to closeout guys while it was still on the water. We never even took it into the warehouse. We just went boop, right to the closeout guys, took our haircut and moved on. But from everybody's perspective, it looked like an absolute slam dunk, and it was on Nick for a year. It actually did well. It was a cute show. All the reasoning that went into it was spot on, but because of this change in scheduling, the whole thing fell apart. So it's never a done deal till the check clears.
Well, and as we often say, and I think a lot of people also feel that timing is everything, and definitely in this case that is really the driver behind that. But there is always going to be that unknown variable. And speaking of variables, we do have some of the questions that are starting to come in. We will start to field those. We do appreciate everyone's attendance thus far and the questions that are coming in. The first one, actually from a brand owner, saying, I'd love to consider these types of opportunities, but with the economy in its current state, do you see these types of opportunities being few and far between? From my perspective, it looks like the biggest impact is when we go back and assessing the white space, assessing the opportunity is the biggest impact. When we talk about looking at the numbers, Frank, when he talked earlier, that's where he always starts kind of his equation in assessing the opportunity. The rest of the pieces actually should still fall into place in the same way. The biggest impact will be on, what can it deliver at retail and those types of opportunities. We are seeing less of a risk tolerance, both on the part of the licensee in the current economy, but this is also an economy that you are poised to, you need to position yourselves that people will turn to brands for comfort in these kinds of situations. I don't know that if Robbie, you had anything to share along those lines of seeing, I don't see any opportunities dwindling because of the economy. I see size and scale and scope.
Yeah, I don't see that you should be guided by the current economic situation, whether it's good or bad. I mean, the opportunity is the opportunity, and not all brands need to be widely distributed in mass. There is some room for the brands that aren't the first or second brand in mid-level that happen to be, specifically for girls. There's a lot of, Limited To and some other chains where you can get some traction. If you're looking for the big brand that's going to be everywhere, the opportunity only exists if you're one of the leaders in your category. If you're not a leader in your category, it's going to be hard to really get that traction.
And with the consolidation that we see even on the retailer side, those retailers are still fighting for differentiation on products. We're seeing here in the U.S. store brands, private label brands actually stepping up and modeling themselves after what's been going on in Europe for quite some time on transcending above the store brand, the private label brand, and actually using licensing. We see a lot, of course, in apparel, but moving into food and beverage and into every category in grocery store as well.
Todd, another question that I usually get and is being asked here is, what are the benefits in a manufacturer acting proactively, like seeking out the license, rather than reactive, which waiting on the brand to come out to them?
Well, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. Is in a sense, that when you see the most successful licensors, that's the approach that they have taken. They have, of course, great brands are going to attract opportunities and attract great licensees, but in using that aspect to look at it, if I'm approached by a manufacturer in, say, Space A, I should talk to several of the manufacturers in Space A to make sure that I'm going with the right partner. So if as a licensee you identify an opportunity and maybe you're approached by a licensor and they appear great on the surface, but if it makes sense, you should take a step back and say, well, what are some similar properties in this space that might be available, that might make even better sense for me, and be proactive in that sense, and then start to look at the opportunity as a whole. If the licensor sees the opportunity, is there a retailer that's already on board with and looking at this? Do I need to talk to them to see, is there additional opportunity on top of this? Is this the one that makes the most sense? I think earlier we talked about, it's not rocket science, it's not exact science, it's more like a weird science that a lot of these factors come into play, but definitely I think a proactive approach should be taken, that you should take the initiative to set your own course and not be directed by acting reactively to just the opportunities that come your way.
Okay.
Yeah, I want to add something to that, is that using licensing professionals, whether it's a firm or an agency that is actively involved, they're going to know more than you can gather by yourself as an individual licensee. And we have relationships with people, and he'll say, oh, I have other licensees that have hooked up with this brand, and they did really well, and it might be beneath my radar screen that I didn't actually know, and they can relate those experiences. And we pretty much go after who we want to go after. We get probably an opportunity a week where somebody's calling us to pitch us because they know we've done very well in the category. And, of course, they want the relationship the other way because we've been very successful. But we try to target who we want to go for, and we'll have our A list. Okay, I'm going for this guy. If I don't get him, then maybe this B list, second one, is okay. So you go with who you want to dance with the most, but the reasons for doing it and being in that category still exist. Sometimes you can't get the appropriate licensor because they've already licensed it to somebody else, or, as Frank said, it's a crowded marketplace and there's bigger opportunity somewhere else.
We're getting another question that's along the same lines that we get from licensors. Is it typical that licensors will have multiple licensees? And if so, how do I know that my company will get its proper attention and the licensor's best efforts? I don't want to be just another company providing a service, and Robert talked about this earlier in assessing that, if you get kind of lost in the shuffle, the attention that you get there goes back to the point we're talking about as you go through that licensor assessment phase. That's something to definitely consider. You want someone with a proven track record, but not, over-licensed to the aspect that either the brand has lost equity or the licensor has turned it more into just a sheer numbers game on getting a volume out there. So that there are things you can address with exclusivity, looking for some product differentiation on your side, really step up to the plate on what you can deliver that will attract the attention of the licensor for the right reason.
Yeah, I think that is a really appropriate question because, sometimes licensors look at us licensees as an ATM machine, and they will vastly over-license, and they will cut the pie. And you have long-sleeve T-shirts, you have short-sleeve T-shirts. So, we've seen, you got 4-inch action figures. This guy has 3-inch action figures. To the consumer, it means nothing. And so what happens is that they cut the pie so small that the licensor ends up not being important to me because I'm just one of 6 guys in that category, and either I don't do as well as I could have, or when time for renewal, I say, who needs that? I'm going to go with a licensor who's smart about it, where less is more. I want to be, whatever category I give this licensee, I want it to be important to him and important to me, and let him capture what's out there instead of dividing it into 4 guys, because I get more advances or I get more guarantees. If you focus on that as a licensor, you're not doing your job. The way both of us make money is that with the royalty stream with a successful product, not on the advance of the guarantee. That's very myopic for a licensor.
Ideally, you have a licensor that's out there going about their business strategically, proactively. You have a licensee that's going out about their business proactively and strategically, and the two come to this intersection where we talked about the perfect storm earlier, and what in essence became a perfect storm in the case of the Martians. Not the right kind of storm, but in that situation of being at the right place at the right time to find that unique opportunity. And it goes back, history will repeat itself, but you don't want to be a copycat. You want to emulate success, but not exactly copy it, and look to put both your own spin on it from a company perspective and from a product perspective.
That's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your time. A copy of the webinar will be available on IMC's website next week at www.imclicensing.com. Please be on the lookout for invites for future webinars, and thank you very much for attending.